The blizzard hit Detroit like a sledgehammer. Through frosted glass, 72-year-old Dorothy Washington watched 9 massive motorcycles disappear under falling snow. 9 leather-clad giants stood on her crumbling porch, ice clinging to their beards, desperation in their eyes. Outside, the temperature was dropping to 15 below zero. Without shelter, anyone caught in this storm would die tonight. Her arthritic hands trembled on the deadbolt. Not from the cold, from fear. These men could overpower her in seconds, take everything she had, hurt her in ways she didn't want to imagine. But they were human beings, and they were dying out there. Dorothy had an impossible choice. Lock the door and let 9 strangers freeze to death, or open it and risk everything. What she didn't know was that the man standing in the center of that group wasn't just any biker, and her next decision would change not just 9 lives, but transform her entire neighborhood forever. But before that life-changing moment, Dorothy Washington was fighting a battle she seemed destined to lose. At 72, Dorothy lived alone in a 2-story house that was slowly crumbling around her. The paint peeled off the siding like old skin. Shingles had blown away in last year's storms, leaving dark patches on the roof where rain seeped through. Every morning at 5:30, Dorothy made instant coffee with powdered milk. Real cream was a luxury she couldn't afford on her $1,200 Social Security check. She'd sit at her kitchen table, reading her worn Bible by the light of a single bulb, praying for strength to make it through another day. The house needed at least $15,000 in repairs, maybe more. The furnace wheezed and rattled, struggling to heat rooms that leaked warmth through cracked windows. Dorothy wore 3 sweaters indoors during winter, her breath visible in the kitchen some mornings. When it rained, she placed pots and buckets around the house to catch dripping water. The steady ping-ping-ping echoed through empty rooms like a countdown timer. Her medicine cabinet told the story of her sacrifices. Blood pressure pills that should be taken daily were rationed to every other day. Diabetes medication stretched thin because the prescription cost more than her weekly grocery budget. She'd learned to make hard choices between staying alive and staying fed. Every Tuesday, Dorothy walked 6 blocks to the grocery store with a calculator in her purse. She'd add up prices as she shopped, putting items back when the total exceeded $47. That was her weekly food budget after rent, utilities, and medicine. The neighborhood around her was dying too. 3 houses on her block stood abandoned, their windows boarded up like closed eyes. Broken streetlights left long stretches of darkness where anything could happen. Young men gathered on corners, suspicious of police, but always respectful when they passed Dorothy's porch. "Morning, Miss Dot," they'd call out. She'd wave back, knowing their mothers had raised them right even if the streets were trying to teach them wrong. Despite everything, Dorothy maintained standards. She swept her front steps every morning, watered dying houseplants with dishwater, and kept an American flag displayed prominently, despite the missing shingles above it. Her late husband Robert had served in Vietnam, and that flag meant something. The old CB radio from Robert's trucking days still worked, crackling occasionally with voices she didn't recognize. Sometimes she'd hear motorcycle groups communicating in codes she didn't understand. The radio was one of the few connections she had to the outside world when her cell phone had no signal. Dorothy's posture remained military straight despite her hardships. Robert had taught her that dignity wasn't something poverty could take away. She still baked cookies for neighborhood children when she could afford the ingredients, let them use her bathroom when they played outside, and fed stray cats with food she could barely spare for herself. The loneliness was the hardest part. Her daughter Regina lived in California, building her own life with her own family. Her son Jerome was deployed overseas, serving his country like his father had. Dorothy was proud of them both, but pride didn't fill the empty rooms or warm the cold nights. She refused to ask for help. These children had their own struggles, their own bills to pay. She wouldn't become a burden, wouldn't guilt them into sacrificing their futures for her comfort. Some mornings, Dorothy would stand at her kitchen sink, looking out at the broken neighborhood, and whisper the same prayer. "Lord knows I've made it this far." Just need to make it through another winter. The house may be falling down, but I'm not. Her neighbors had learned to keep their distance, not because Dorothy was unfriendly, but because she had standards. She called the police when drug dealers set up shop too close to the elementary school. She reported loud parties that kept working families awake. She maintained her property even when everyone else had given up. They thought she was difficult. They didn't understand she was fighting for something bigger than herself. This neighborhood had raised 5 children. Every sidewalk crack held memories of scraped knees she'd bandaged. Every tree had shaded birthday parties and barbecues when times were better. Dorothy sorted her pills into a weekly container each Sunday, making them last as long as possible. She'd learned which medicines were absolutely necessary and which ones she could skip when money was tight. Her body ached constantly, but complaints wouldn't pay the bills. The CB radio crackled more frequently lately, picking up transmissions from groups that seemed organized, disciplined. Sometimes she'd hear fragments, road conditions, welfare checks, community service. It reminded her of Robert's old trucking buddies, looking out for each other on long hauls. But that was a different world, a world where people still believed in helping strangers, where a man's word meant something, where service to others mattered more than service to yourself. Dorothy didn't know that the world was about to come knocking on her door. As she prepared for bed that March evening, checking locks twice and adjusting the thermostat down to save money, Dorothy had no idea that the biggest test of her faith was less than 12 hours away. Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall. Then came the storm that would test everything Dorothy believed about helping strangers. The Weather Service had been warning about it for 3 days. An unprecedented March blizzard was heading for Detroit, bringing life-threatening conditions. Temperatures would drop to 15 below zero with 60-mile-per-hour winds. Power lines would snap. Roads would become impassable. Dorothy had lived through plenty of storms, but something about this one felt different, more dangerous, more final. At 6:47 that evening, the ancient furnace in Dorothy's basement finally gave up. She heard it wheeze, rattle, then fall silent with a mechanical sigh that sounded almost human. Within minutes, the temperature in the house began dropping. Dorothy pulled on a third sweater and called her daughter Regina in California. "Just checking in, baby," she said, forcing cheerfulness into her voice. "How are my grandbabies?" She didn't mention the furnace. Didn't want Regina worrying about things she couldn't fix from 2,000 miles away. Dorothy had learned long ago that some burdens were meant to be carried alone. By 7:23, her breath was visible in the kitchen. The old space heater she plugged in immediately tripped the house's ancient electrical system. The lights flickered and died, leaving Dorothy in darkness. She found the CB radio by feel, switching it on by the glow of its amber display. Static filled the air, broken by fragmented emergency calls. Roads blocked by fallen trees. Bikes won't start in this cold. Hypothermia risks increasing. Need shelter fast. Dorothy realized motorcyclists were stranded somewhere nearby. In this weather, exposed to the elements, they wouldn't survive the night. The temperature inside her house was dropping rapidly. Without heat, Dorothy faced her own survival crisis. Her diabetes made her circulation poor, and cold affected her worse than most people. Her fingers were already growing numb, making it hard to work the radio dial. She might not survive the night either. But somehow strangers outside were facing immediate death from exposure. And Dorothy Washington had been raised to believe that when someone needed help, you helped. No matter what. The moral conflict tore at her. Every news story she'd ever heard about motorcycle gangs flashed through her mind. Bar fights, drug rumors, violence. Recent incidents in Detroit where bikers had terrorized businesses, intimidated families. Every survival instinct screamed at her to stay inside, lock the doors, let someone else deal with whatever was happening out there. But what would Jesus do? What would Robert do? Outside, the storm was getting worse. Windows rattled violently in their frames. Snow fell horizontally, making visibility 0. Tree branches snapped like gunshots in the darkness. Dorothy's old Honda was already buried completely under snow. Even if she wanted to leave, escape was impossible. At 8:15, thunderous pounding shook her front door. Through the frosted glass, Dorothy could make out 9 massive silhouettes. Leather jackets, chains glinting in the porch light, beards covered in ice. They looked like giants, like something from a nightmare. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her arthritic hands fumbled for her cell phone, but the storm had knocked out the towers. No signal. The landline was dead too. The CB radio was her only communication with the outside world, but these men needed help now. Not in an hour when help might arrive. Now. More pounding on the door. Urgent but not violent. Desperate but not demanding. Dorothy crept closer, her slippered feet silent on the cold linoleum. She could hear voices through the door, muffled by wind but surprisingly respectful. "Ma'am?" The voice was deep, authoritative but polite. "I'm sorry to bother you. Our bikes are dead, roads are impassable. We just need shelter until morning. We have sleeping bags, won't be any trouble." Dorothy's hand hovered over the deadbolt. This was the moment. Turn away 9 human beings and let them freeze to death, or risk everything to save them. She thought about Robert, somewhere beyond the stars, watching. What would he say if she let people die when she could have saved them? She thought about her faith, all those Sunday sermons about Good Samaritans and loving thy neighbor. Did that only apply when thy neighbor looked like you, talked like you, dressed like you? The wind howled louder. The voices outside were growing weaker, more desperate. These weren't just strangers anymore. They were human beings on the edge of death. Dorothy closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. "Lord, if this is how I go, let it be helping others." Her hand reached for the deadbolt. But what she was about to discover would change everything she thought she knew about the men standing on her porch. What happened next went against every survival instinct, but revealed who Dorothy really was. The deadbolt clicked open. 9 giants filed through her doorway, stomping snow and shaking ice from their beards. But instead of chaos, Dorothy witnessed something unexpected. Military precision. "Thank you, ma'am," the leader said, removing his helmet to reveal gray hair and weathered features. "We won't forget this kindness." "Kitchen's the warmest room," Dorothy managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll make coffee." The bikers moved with organized efficiency. No shouting, no disorder. The leader's voice cut through the group like a command. "Sound off. Any injuries?" "Frostbite on fingers, Sergeant." "Nothing serious." "All good here? Ready for orders?" Dorothy paused. "Sergeant?" These men responded like soldiers, not gang members. They arranged their sleeping bags with mathematical spacing across her living room floor. When Dorothy offered her couch, they refused in unison. "You keep your comfort, ma'am. We're used to sleeping rough." The leader organized them into duties without being asked. 2 men examined her dead furnace with flashlights. Others checked her smoke detector batteries. One quietly inventoried her medicine bottles on the kitchen counter. "Ma'am," he asked softly, "when did you last eat a real meal?" Dorothy's cheeks burned. "I eat fine." "Yes, ma'am. Just asking." She served instant coffee in mismatched mugs, apologizing for not having real cream. These leather-clad giants praised it like the finest restaurant coffee they'd ever tasted. "This is perfect, ma'am." "Thank you. Haven't had coffee this good in weeks." "You're too kind, miss." Dorothy Washington. Friends call me Dot." The leader extended a gloved hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Dot." Well, call me Eagle." From the basement came muffled conversation and the sound of tools. 20 minutes later, Her furnace rumbled back to life. "Igniter was shot," one of the mechanics reported to Eagle. "Jerry-rigged something temporary. Should hold till she gets proper parts." Dorothy felt warmth flowing through the vents for the first time in hours. "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing, ma'am. Just neighbors helping neighbors." Eagle organized a watch schedule while Dorothy prepared what food she had. Canned soup stretched with extra water, crackers that weren't too stale. The men shared military rations from their packs, insisting Dorothy eat first. "Ma'am, you take the good stuff. We're used to eating anything." As the night deepened, Dorothy's fear transformed into something else. Curiosity. These weren't the dangerous criminals she'd imagined. They spoke quietly among themselves, using terms she recognized from Robert's army days. Perimeter secure. All quiet. Next watch in 2 hours. One man stood guard by the front window while others slept. When Dorothy got up at 3 a.m. for her medication, she found Eagle sitting alert in the darkness. "All quiet, ma'am," he whispered. "Rest easy. We've got you covered." For the first time in 3 years, Dorothy felt completely safe in her own home. Dawn came gray and cold, but the storm was breaking. Eagle woke his men with quiet efficiency. They cleaned Dorothy's floors better than she'd cleaned them in months, packed their gear with military precision. Every man thanked Dorothy personally before leaving. No loud voices, no crude language, just genuine gratitude from what appeared to be genuinely good men. Eagle approached last, pulling a thick envelope from his jacket. "Miss Dot, this is for the furnace repair, utilities, whatever you need." Dorothy pushed it back firmly. "I didn't help you for money." His eyebrows raised. Clearly, he wasn't used to refusal. "Ma'am, most people would have—" "I'm not most people." Dorothy's voice carried quiet dignity. "You're good men?" "I can see that now. That's enough payment." Eagle studied her face like he was memorizing it. "What's your full name, ma'am?" "Dorothy Washington. Why?" Instead of answering, he pulled out a business card, hesitated, then put it away. From his pocket, he produced a small metal keychain with an Eagle logo and letters underneath. MCVET. "My call sign," he said. "Anyone bothers you, show them this." Anyone at all. Dorothy didn't recognize the significance, but she accepted it gracefully. Eagle also handed her a folded piece of paper. "My personal number. Anything, and I mean anything you need, you call me." "I don't expect anything," Dorothy replied. "Just be safe out there." "Ma'am, you don't understand." Eagle's voice carried weight she didn't recognize. "In our world, debts get paid. Always." "No debt," Dorothy insisted. "Just neighbors helping neighbors." What happened next surprised everyone, including Dorothy. Eagle snapped to attention and delivered a full military salute. Sharp, precise, perfect. The other 8 men immediately followed suit, saluting Dorothy Washington like she was a commanding officer. Dorothy stood confused but deeply touched by the gesture. She didn't understand what it meant, but she felt its importance. "Ma'am," Eagle said, lowering his salute, "you saved 9 lives last night. In our world, that matters. That means everything. I just did what anyone would do." "No, ma'am. You did what heroes do. The bikes started immediately. They'd somehow fixed them during the night while Dorothy slept." Each man waved as they rode away, engines rumbling in formation down her quiet street. Dorothy stood on her porch, watching them disappear, holding the keychain and phone number. The house behind her was warm. Her floors were clean. Her furnace worked. But something had changed in Dorothy, too. For the first time in years, she felt connected to something bigger than her own survival. She looked at the keychain again. MCVET. What did that mean? And why had they saluted her like a soldier? Dorothy filed the phone number in her Bible and went inside to make real breakfast. She had a feeling she was going to need her strength for whatever came next, because something told her this wasn't over. Something told her it had only just begun. She had no idea that refusing their money would lead to something far more valuable than cash could ever buy. After the bikers disappeared down her street, Dorothy returned to her warm kitchen with questions spinning through her mind. The keychain felt heavier in her palm than its actual weight. The business card Eagle had almost given her. Why had he changed his mind? The morning light revealed just how thoroughly these men had cleaned her home. Floors scrubbed spotless, windows wiped clear. Even her old coffee pot gleamed like new. They'd left behind small improvements everywhere. A loose cabinet handle tightened, a wobbly table leg secured, batteries replaced in her smoke detector. Most telling of all, they'd stacked firewood by her back door wood that definitely hadn't been there before. Where did it come from? When had they found time to gather it? Dorothy examined the keychain more closely. The eagle design was intricate, professional. Below it, those mysterious letters, M-C-V-E-T. The metal was high quality, like something official, something earned. She tried to remember everything about their departure, the way they'd stood at attention, the precision of their salutes. How Eagle had said, "In our world, debts get paid." What world was that? Dorothy made herself a proper breakfast for the first time in months. Real eggs instead of stretching one into 2 meals. Toast with actual butter instead of margarine. The furnace hummed steadily, filling her house with blessed warmth. As she ate, fragments of their conversations replayed in her memory. Sound off any injuries? Sergeant, all good here. Perimeter secure. We've got you covered. Military language, not gang slang, not criminal code words, the precise terminology Robert had used during his Army years. Dorothy pulled out her worn photo of Robert in his Vietnam uniform. Same bearing, same quiet confidence, same automatic respect for others. Had these men served too? She studied the phone number Eagle had given her. Area code 313 local. But something about the way he'd written it seemed formal, official, like a military contact card. The more Dorothy thought about it, the more questions multiplied. These weren't ordinary bikers. The equipment was too good. The organization is too tight. The respect is genuine. And that salute. Dorothy might not know much about motorcycles, but she knew military protocol. You didn't salute civilians unless they'd earned it somehow, unless they were family of those who'd served, unless they were something special. Dorothy's phone rang. Regina called from California. "Mom, are you okay?" "The weather service says Detroit got hit hard." "I'm fine, baby." "The furnace is working, and the house is warm." "Thank God, I was worried sick." "Power outages, road closures. How did you manage?" Dorothy hesitated. How could she explain what had happened? 9 leather-clad strangers who turned out to be gentlemen? A night that changed her understanding of human nature? "Some neighbors helped out," she said finally. "Good people when you need them." "Neighbors?" "Mama, you always said nobody on that street cared about anybody." Maybe I was wrong about that. After hanging up, Dorothy sat quietly in her warm kitchen. For 3 years, she'd felt abandoned by the world. Forgotten. Invisible. Last night, 9 strangers had treated her like family, like she mattered. They'd asked for nothing except shelter. When offered payment, Eagle had looked genuinely confused by her refusal. Most people expected something in return for kindness, but Dorothy Washington had learned long ago that real kindness expected nothing back. What she didn't expect was how much that philosophy would mean to men who'd clearly seen too much of the world's darkness. The CB radio crackled softly in the background. Dorothy turned up the volume, hoping to catch those motorcycle transmissions again. Instead, she heard normal chatter truckers, emergency services, amateur radio operators. Whatever network Eagle's group used, they weren't broadcasting openly anymore. But Dorothy had the strangest feeling they were still around, still watching, still protecting. She looked out her front window at the quiet street, snow melting in the morning sun. Everything appeared normal, but something fundamental had shifted. Dorothy Washington was no longer alone in the world. She just didn't know yet how dramatically her life was about to change. Over the next few weeks, Dorothy began noticing strange changes in her neighborhood that made her wonder what she'd really gotten herself into. The first sign came 3 days after the storm. Dorothy stepped outside to collect her mail and found her garbage bins placed neatly back beside her house. In 3 years of living alone, the garbage collectors had never, not once, returned her bins to their proper spot. Week 1 brought subtle shifts. The drug dealers who usually gathered on the corner simply vanished. No confrontation. No police raids. They just stopped showing up. Neighborhood kids mentioned cool bikers asking questions about who lived where. Mrs. Jenkins next door reported motorcycles cruising slowly past their houses, riders taking careful note of address numbers. "Dot, you know some bikers?" asked Tony, who owned the corner convenience store. "They've been coming in, asking about you." Real polite, but intense, you know? Like they're checking on something. Dorothy's mail carrier, a chatty woman named Brenda, mentioned the same thing during her Tuesday delivery. "Miss Dorothy, there's been motorcycles around here asking about your address. Not threatening or nothing, just making sure they know where you live. Everything okay?" Week 2 escalated the mystery. Dorothy woke one morning to find her broken streetlight, the one that had flickered uselessly for 8 months, suddenly working perfectly. When she asked the city utilities department, they had no record of a repair order. Someone had shoveled her walkway after Tuesday's snowfall. Dorothy never asked for help, and she'd been inside all morning. The work was professional, thorough, like someone who took pride in the job. Groceries appeared on her porch Wednesday evening. Quality food, real cream, fresh bread, actual butter. A handwritten note said simply, "From grateful friends." No signature. The CB radio became more active, crackling with coded transmissions Dorothy was starting to recognize. "Eagle's Nest secure. Mama Bear's location confirmed. Perimeter check complete. Mama Bear." Dorothy had a growing suspicion they were talking about her. Thursday's local news featured a story about community service projects around Detroit. The reporter mentioned a Veterans Motorcycle Club organizing neighborhood cleanups and safety patrols. Dorothy glimpsed a familiar logo in the background footage, an eagle symbol she'd seen before. She checked her keychain. Same eagle. Same professional design. Friday morning brought the most telling evidence yet. Dorothy found a small American flag planted in her front garden, positioned perfectly to catch the morning sun. She hadn't put it there. None of her neighbors admitted to the gesture. But someone had chosen that spot deliberately. Someone who knew what that flag meant to a military widow. The pieces were forming a picture Dorothy was almost afraid to complete. These weren't just grateful strangers keeping an eye on her. This was organized protection from people who understood service, sacrifice, and honor. The question wasn't whether they were watching over her anymore. The question was, who exactly had she helped that night? When Dorothy finally made that phone call, she discovered the truth that would change everything she thought she knew about the men she'd saved. 3 weeks after the storm, Dorothy sat at her kitchen table with Eagle's phone number in her trembling hands. The mysterious protection, the neighborhood changes, the growing evidence she needed answers. The phone rang twice before a deep, authoritative voice answered. "This is Colonel James Morrison, United States Army, retired." Dorothy's breath caught. "Colonel? Colonel?" she stammered. This is Dorothy Washington. You stayed at my house during the blizzard?" The formality in his voice instantly melted into warmth. "Miss Dot!" "Ma'am, I've been hoping you'd call. How are you? House staying warm? Furnace holding up?" "Colonel Morrison," Dorothy said carefully, "who exactly are you?" A pause, then a chuckle that sounded almost embarrassed. "Ma'am, I suppose I owe you some explanations. My name is Colonel James Eagle Morrison, 28 years of service, most recently commanding the 75th Ranger Regiment. I'm a recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor, 3 Purple Hearts, and more commendations than I probably deserved. Dorothy felt the room spinning. Congressional Medal of Honor? The men with you that night? Every single one is a decorated combat veteran, Miss Dot. Diesel Thompson Navy SEAL, Purple Heart recipient, Doc Martinez Army medic who saved 47 lives in Afghanistan, Tank Williams Marine Corps, Bronze Star for valor. I could go on, but you get the idea. Dorothy's legs gave out. She sank into her chair, mind reeling. You mean, you're all heroes? No, ma'am. Morrison's voice carried quiet conviction. You're the hero. You saved 9 veterans who've seen too much death, too much darkness. That night, you reminded us what we fought for. The pieces crashed together in Dorothy's mind. The military precision, the discipline, the respect, the salutes. The Motorcycle Club. MCVET stands for Motorcycle Club Veterans, Miss Dot. I founded it after my retirement. Therapy for PTSD, community service, helping brothers transition back to civilian life. We ride together, serve together, heal together. Dorothy's voice was barely a whisper. Why didn't you tell me? Ma'am, we've learned that some people treat us differently when they know our service records. You helped us because we were human beings in need. That meant everything. Morrison's voice grew serious. Miss Dot, I need to tell you something else. After that night, I did some research on you. Your husband, Robert Washington, served in Vietnam, 1967 to 1969. Army mechanic, Good Conduct Medal, honorable discharge. Yes, but how did you... Ma'am, he served with my mentor, Sergeant First Class William Bull Martinez. Doc's father, actually. Your Robert saved Bull's life during the Tet Offensive. Fixed his damaged vehicle under enemy fire, got him to medical aid in time. Dorothy's hands flew to her mouth. Robert had never talked about specific incidents from the war. Ma'am, Bull Martinez trained me, shaped me into the soldier I became. Without him, I never would have survived my first deployment, let alone earned the respect of my men. Your husband saved the man who made my career possible. Tears streamed down Dorothy's face. Robert never said. Good men rarely do, Miss Dot. But heroes recognize heroes. That night at your house wasn't a chance. It was Robert's spirit working through you, taking care of his military family. Morrison continued, his voice thick with emotion. When we saluted you, we weren't just thanking you for shelter. We were honoring Robert's widow, showing respect for a family that sacrificed for this country. I never knew, Dorothy whispered. There's more, ma'am. That protection you've been noticing? 847 veterans across 3 states now consider you family, not just because of that night, but because of what Robert did 56 years ago. Dorothy could barely process the scope of what she was hearing. Miss Dot, we've been watching your 6th That's military talk for covering your back because you've always been one of us. You just didn't know it. The CB radio crackled in the background, as if responding to Morrison's words. Dorothy finally understood those coded transmissions. Eagle's nest is secure, she said softly. Yes, ma'am. That's you. You're our Eagle's nest, our safe harbor. Every veteran in the network knows your address, your situation, your importance to our brotherhood. Morrison's voice carried promise and protection. Ma'am, you'll never want for anything again. Not because we owe you a debt, though we do, but because you're family. You've always been family. Dorothy understood now why the neighborhood felt safer, why dealers disappeared, why her needs were mysteriously met. She wasn't just under protection, she was under the care of a military family that spanned the entire Midwest. That salute, Dorothy said, remembering. Full military honors, ma'am. For the widow of a hero, from grateful soldiers who understand sacrifice. Dorothy looked out her window at the quiet street, seeing it with completely new eyes. The American flag someone had planted in her garden, the careful attention to her property, the respectful distance that still conveyed absolute security. "Colonel Morrison," she said finally, "what happens now?" His answer would change her life forever. "Now, Miss Dot, we take care of our own, and you've got 800 sons who'll die before letting harm come to you." Dorothy Washington, who had spent 3 years feeling forgotten by the world, discovered she was surrounded by a family she never knew existed. The story was just beginning. What Colonel Morrison offered next would solve every problem Dorothy had ever faced and create possibilities she'd never dared dream. "Miss Dot," Morrison said, his voice carrying the authority of command and the warmth of family, "I'm going to lay out a comprehensive plan. You just listen and tell me what you think." Dorothy gripped the phone tighter, her heart racing. "First, your house. My construction company, it's veteran-owned, employs 47 former service members, is going to completely renovate your home. New roof, furnace, electrical system, plumbing, accessibility features for aging in place. We're talking about $78,000 worth of work, all donated materials and labor." Dorothy's breath caught. "Colonel, that's too much." "Ma'am, let me finish. You'll stay in the guest house on my property during renovation. 6 weeks, everything provided. My wife Sarah has already prepared the room and can't wait to meet you." Morrison continued with military precision. "Second, I discovered you've been rationing medications. I had our VA benefits specialist, that's Tank Williams, the Marine you met, research your case. Miss Dot, you're entitled to widow's benefits you never knew about. $2,847 a month, plus $68,000 in retroactive payments dating back 3 years. Dorothy's legs went weak. That much money would change everything. The VA medical benefits cover all your prescriptions, dental care, vision care, even transportation to appointments. We've got volunteer drivers throughout the network. You'll have a personal advocate, that's Doc Martinez's sister, Elena. She's a retired VA administrator who knows every program available." "But how is this possible?" "Ma'am, Robert earned every penny of these benefits for you. The system failed to inform you properly when he passed. We're just making sure you get what's rightfully yours." Morrison's voice grew warmer. "Third, we'd like to offer you an official position. Den mother for the motorcycle club. $500 a month salary, plus an honorary title that means everything to us. Your house becomes our community support center." Dorothy felt tears starting. "What would I do?" "What you're already doing, Miss Dot. Take care of people who need taking care of. We'd hold weekly dinners at your house, you cook for whoever shows up. We provide all groceries and cleanup help. Counseling sessions for veterans struggling with civilian life. Community meetings to coordinate neighborhood safety." The scope was overwhelming. Dorothy tried to process it all. "There's more," Morrison continued. "Sarah discovered you never finished high school because you got married young and started raising babies. We've arranged for you to complete your GED, then enroll in a 3-month peer counseling certificate program at the community college." Dorothy's voice was barely audible. "At my age?" "Miss Dot, you've got more life experience and natural wisdom than most college graduates. We need someone who understands struggle, who's earned respect through character, not credentials." Morrison paused, letting the weight settle. "Your renovation includes a memorial corner honoring Robert's service, with his photos and medals displayed properly. The basement becomes a meeting space for veteran support groups. The backyard gets a garden restoration. Sarah tells me you love flowers." "How did she know that?" "Because good people recognize good people, ma'am. And because we've been paying attention to what makes you happy." The offers kept coming. "We're organizing a surprise reunion with your family. Paid flights for Regina and the grandchildren from California. Jerome gets emergency leave from his deployment. For the first time in years, you'll all be together, and they'll see the renovated home." Dorothy was crying openly now. "This is too much. I never asked for anything." Miss Dot, the best people never do ask. That's exactly why they deserve everything. Morrison's tone became serious. There are legal protections, too. We've established a trust fund ensuring your security forever. Veteran lawyers protecting your interests. Medical power of attorney network if you ever need care. Will and estate planning securing the house for your family. But what if something happens to you, Colonel? Ma'am, this network spans 3 states and includes active duty military, police officers, firefighters, EMTs, federal agents. All veterans. All committed to the brotherhood. If something happens to me, 846 others pick up the responsibility. Dorothy looked around her kitchen, imagining it filled with people who needed family as much as she did. The community impact goes beyond your house, Morrison continued. We're buying the abandoned property next door, turning it into transitional housing for homeless veterans. Crime rates are already dropping because of our presence. Other neighborhoods are requesting similar programs. His voice softened. Miss Dot, you showed us what honor looks like in civilian clothes. You reminded 9 broken soldiers that good still exists in the world. Now, let us show you what gratitude looks like in action. Dorothy thought about Robert, wondering if he could see this moment from wherever heroes go when they die. Your husband would be proud as hell, Morrison said, as if reading her thoughts. And frankly, ma'am, we're all proud to call you family. The silence stretched as Dorothy processed the magnitude of what was being offered. Complete financial security, a home restored to beauty, medical care without worry, most importantly, a purpose that mattered, and a family that would never abandon her. What do you say, Miss Dot? Will you let us take care of our own? Dorothy's answer would determine not just her future, but the future of everyone whose life she would touch in the years to come. 6 months later, Dorothy's neighborhood had transformed beyond recognition, and so had Dorothy herself. The Victorian house that once leaked and creaked now stood as the crown jewel of the block. Fresh paint gleamed white with navy blue trim. New windows sparkled in the sunlight. The roof no longer shed shingles like autumn leaves, and warm light glowed from every room. Dorothy's street had become something from a different era. Veteran families moved into renovated houses where drug dealers once operated. The empty lot sprouted a community garden where neighbors grew vegetables to share. New street lights illuminated sidewalks that children could walk safely, even after dark. The numbers told an incredible story. Neighborhood crime rates dropped 67% in 6 months. Property values increased 34% as families discovered a place where community meant something again. Local businesses reported 28% revenue increases as veteran families spent money locally, supporting their neighbors. Dorothy herself looked like a completely different woman. Proper nutrition and health care had helped her lose 30 pounds of stress weight while gaining energy she hadn't felt in years. Her new wardrobe gifts from the Veteran Wives Organization replaced the worn house dresses with colorful outfits that matched her renewed spirit. At 72, Dorothy was enrolled in community college, maintaining a 3.8 GPA in her peer counseling certificate program. She studied at the kitchen table where she'd once counted pills and stretched grocery budgets, now surrounded by textbooks and veteran family photos. Her daily routine had transformed completely. 6 a.m. brought coffee with Colonel Morrison on her front porch, planning community activities. 8 a.m. meant online classes, where Dorothy's life experience proved more valuable than any textbook. 10 a.m. brought tutoring sessions with neighborhood children who now called her Grandma Dot. Afternoons were devoted to her new role as certified peer counselor. Veterans drove from across the state to talk with Dorothy Washington, the widow who understood loss, struggle, and finding hope in darkness. Her basement counseling space stayed booked weeks in advance. The media attention had been overwhelming at first. Local news featured Dorothy's story as the grandmother who united a community. National veteran magazines ran cover stories about her work. Documentary crews followed her daily routine, amazed by the ripple effects of one night's kindness. Hollywood producers had called about movie rights. Dorothy was considering their offer, but only if proceeds funded veteran housing programs in other cities. Everything she touched now seemed to multiply into opportunities for others. The Sunday dinners had become legendary. Dorothy's kitchen served 50 to 60 people every week. Veterans, their families, neighbors who needed community, college students studying for finals, elderly residents who had no one else. The dining room Morrison's crew had expanded, now buzzed with conversation in 3 languages as the neighborhood diversified with new families. Her influence extended far beyond Detroit. 12 other cities had implemented similar programs, pairing veteran motorcycle clubs with isolated military widows. Dorothy consulted on each program, sharing lessons learned from her experience. Morrison's construction company had grown to employ 89 veterans, using Dorothy's house renovation as a model for community rebuilding projects. The waiting list for their services stretched 6 months, but priority always went to military families in need. The personal relationships flourished most of all. Weekly video calls with daughter Regina had evolved into monthly visits as grandchildren competed to spend summers with Grandma Dot. Jerome's deployment ended early, and he'd moved back to Detroit to help coordinate veteran services, working directly with Morrison's organization. Dorothy's house had become the unofficial emergency shelter for the entire neighborhood. When storms hit, families knew they could find safety, warmth, and hot coffee at Miss Dot's place. Her guest rooms stayed occupied by veterans transitioning to civilian life, students saving money for college, and families rebuilding after setbacks. The CB radio now coordinated a network of community volunteers. Morning check-ins ensured elderly residents were safe. Evening reports tracked neighborhood security. Dorothy's voice had become the calm center of a communication web spanning 3 counties. Recognition followed recognition. Presidential Volunteer Service Awards, state legislature proclamations, honorary doctorate from Wayne State University, invitations to speak at military bases nationwide about community resilience and veteran integration. But Dorothy's favorite recognition came from unexpected sources. Former drug dealers, now enrolled in veteran-sponsored recovery programs, stopped by to thank her for creating a neighborhood where children could play safely. Young mothers credited her with giving them hope that communities could change. The transformation was measurable, documentable, and continuing to spread. What started with 9 frozen bikers had become a movement that proved ordinary kindness could create extraordinary change. Dorothy Washington had become exactly what she'd always been. A woman who opened her door when someone needed help. The difference was, now the whole world was watching and learning from her example. 1 year later, Dorothy faced another knock on her door during a storm and proved that some things never change. March 15th, exactly 1 year after 9 frozen bikers had changed her life forever. Another blizzard swept through Detroit, bringing the same bone-chilling winds and blinding snow. But this time, Dorothy Washington watched the storm from inside a warm, secure home. New windows held back the cold. The furnace hummed steadily. Emergency supplies filled her pantry, and a backup generator waited in the basement. At 8:15 p.m., the exact time the bikers had knocked the year before, Dorothy's doorbell rang. She smiled instead of trembling. Through the glass, she saw a young Hispanic family huddled together. A man in his 20s, a woman holding a crying baby, both shivering in inadequate clothing. Their car sat dead in her driveway, covered in snow. Dorothy opened the door immediately. "Come in, she called out, just as she had a year ago. "Let me make some coffee." The young father looked embarrassed, desperate. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry to bother you. Our car died, the phone's dead, and we just need to call for help. The baby's cold, and we didn't know where else to go." "No apologies needed," Dorothy said, ushering them into her warm kitchen. "You did exactly right coming here." As she prepared hot chocolate and sandwiches, Dorothy learned their story. Miguel had recently been discharged from the army after 3 tours in Afghanistan, struggling with PTSD and civilian adjustment. His wife, Maria, was finishing nursing school while caring for their premature baby who needed specialized medical attention. They were moving to Detroit for a VA job opportunity, a fresh start in a new city where they knew no one. Within an hour, Colonel Morrison arrived with a mechanic. The veteran network mobilized automatically, offering immediate assistance. Miguel would start work with Morrison's construction company on Monday. Maria would have study space for her nursing finals. The baby would receive care through the veteran medical network. By midnight, the family had keys to a small apartment 2 blocks away, fully furnished by veteran volunteers. Miguel stared in amazement at the instant community that surrounded him. How can we ever repay this kindness? Dorothy smiled, the same response she'd given Morrison a year ago. Just help the next person who needs it. That's how kindness grows. As the family settled safely in their new home, Dorothy returned to her kitchen. She looked at Robert's photo on the mantel, surrounded by pictures of her extended veteran family. We did good, didn't we, baby? She whispered. Through the window, she watched Morrison's crew clearing the family's driveway. The CB radio crackled with check-ins from veteran patrols across the city. Her phone showed 17 text messages from neighbors making sure she was safe. Dorothy checked the weather forecast. Another storm is coming next week. She smiled and restocked her coffee supplies. More people might need help, and Dorothy Washington would be ready. Outside, snow continued falling on a neighborhood where no one had to face storms alone anymore. Dorothy's story proves that one act of courage can change everything, but it raises a question we all need to answer. In a world that often feels divided by fear, Dorothy Washington showed us an eternal truth. Kindness is the strongest force in the universe. 9 terrified veterans found more than shelter that night. They found their purpose again. One elderly woman's courage created a family of 847 protectors. Here's what Dorothy understood that many of us forget. You don't need money, power, or special skills to change lives. You just need the courage to open your door when someone needs help. Every day, someone around you is facing their own blizzard. A neighbor struggling alone. A veteran battling invisible wounds. A family one emergency away from losing everything. So here's my question for you. When your moment comes, and it will come, will you be someone's Dorothy Washington? Be the person who opens the door. Check on elderly neighbors. Help a veteran. Feed someone hungry. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video if you believe kindness matters. Subscribe for more stories that prove ordinary heroes walk among us every day. Because the world needs more people like Dorothy Washington. And that person could be you.